Hi, today is May 11th, 2025, and today I will be summarizing and talking about my thoughts on the research paper Deep Learning for Sensor-Based Activity Recognition, a survey. So this survey basically summarizes the innovations and the mm, techniques of other research papers for human activity recognition, specifically sensor-based human activity recognition. Mm. It first presents the advantages of using deep learning for human activity recognition. Mm, So most of the time, features are extracted in a handcrafted way, which heavily relies on like human knowledge and human experience. However, generally only like super shallow features can be learned according to human expertise because many people may overlook like um may overlook patterns that may not be very obvious, and therefore handcrafted features can are not very are pretty low level and can s- only be used to recognize like simple activities. However, deep learning can uh like learn many patterns that um like humans will like overlook, and therefore it can like derive more complex or high level features to predict like more complex activities. So this survey then focuses on sensors. So there are three main types of sensors: body-worn sensors, such as like smartwatches or phones, and are worn on a user or human. An object sensor, which are usually placed on objects to detect the movements of objects, and are sometimes used in like smart homes, and ambient sensors, which are used to capture like the the movements in the environment. And there are hybrid sensors too. So this survey then listed different types of deep models. So first is the deep neural network, and the deep neural network is developed from the artificial neural network, or ANN. However, traditional artificial neural networks generally contain less hidden layers, and DNNs have more hidden layers and are more deep, basically. So DNNs can be effective for learning like delicate patterns and tendencies in data. So generally, like um, DNNs do well when the data is multi-dimensional and the activities are more complex. The second deep model is the convolutional neural network. Mm, So the convolutional neural network has two advantages, um, local dependency and scale invariance. So local dependency means that nearby signals in the data are like can be correlated, and then the CNNs can take advantage of that. And CNNs also have the advantage that um, it's has good scale invariance. So if the signals are um have different like paces or frequencies, it can adjust to that. So There are a few important aspects to be considered um, when applying CNNs to human activity recognition. The first one is input adaptation. So HAR sensors produce time series readings and signals. So these signals and readings have to be adapted to be fed into the CNN. And there are two types of adaptations, model driven and data driven. So, data driven approaches treat each dimension as a channel and then performs 1D convolution on them. And each dimension, X, Y, and Z, is treated as like a separate as a separate channel, such as like in the RGB of an image. So this treats the sensor readings as a 1D image or like a string or channel, and this is pretty simple and easy to implement. However, this ignores dependencies between dimensions and sensors. For example, if x and y, and if the x and y dimensions have dependencies, this approach might ignore them. The second approach is the model-driven approach, and this resizes the inputs to a 2D image and to adopt a 2D convolution. And this can take advantage of temporal correlations of sensors. Um, yeah. However, um, mapping the time series to an image requires like really a lot of like domain expertise and is not a very easy task. Some other things to note when applying CNN to HAR are pooling. Um, there are a few different approaches to doing convolution pooling in CNNs and weight sharing. Another deep model is the autoencoder. So, or in this case, the stacked autoencoder, which basically treats every layer as a um, a separate model of autoencoder. The advantages of stacked autoencoders are that it can perform unsupervised feature learning for HAR and could be a powerful tool for feature extraction, as it could extract some more complicated features. However, as stacked autoencoders depend a lot too much on its layers and activation functions sometimes, so um, it may be hard to find like the optimal solutions, and it might get stuck on a local minimum easily. The paper also talks about restricted Boltzmann machines, which I will skip over, and also recurrent neural networks. So, we generally, LSTMs or long short-term memory networks are used um, most often, most often, and while this can, while LSTMs can have a benefit because they utilize temporal correlation, they sometimes also have a too slow learning speed and high resource consumption. Okay, so there are many, so then the paper talked about applications. So there are many different applications for HAR in like lifestyle, such as sleep or sitting detection, health and disease issues, um, such as um, detecting Parkinson's disease from like walking and gait, which is reflected from inertial sensors attached to shoes, or etc. And however, sometimes, um, while most most work focused on like body movements such as walking, sitting, um, lying down, um, it's hard to recognize higher level activities, such as, for example, drinking coffee or typing, etc. And so finally, the paper ended with some challenges that it mentioned. So one challenge that it mentioned is that it is hard to actually deploy um, applications or apps for human activity recognition because mm, a lot of existing work adopted like deep age deep human activity recognition on smartphones or smartwatches that are far from online and mobile deployment. Um, Sometimes like these applications will have trouble with real-time data, which is like continuous and um, and these approaches may have trouble with incremental learning. A second challenge is that um, there are challenges with collecting enough um, like data. So and so deep learning relies heavily on labeled samples, but those samples often are time consuming or resource consuming to collect. And so that is one challenge. A third challenge is that um, there's a shortage of like flexible models to recognize complex features and high-level activities. Existing methods sometimes like ignore the correlations between different sensors, so and this may lead to like less good results. And a fourth challenge is that there is lack of lightweight deep models because deep models often require a lot of computing resources. Um, this is not really available for wearable devices, and therefore it's necessary to develop lightweight, convenient deep models and technology to perform human activity recognition. So, in conclusion, overall, this research paper um, highlighted a lot of techniques in deep learning for human activity recognition and talked a lot about different deep learning approaches, um, types of sensors, and applications. They also summarized and talked about several grand challenges while also presenting some solutions for those challenges. And yeah.